So good afternoon, and I want to start by thanking the National Endowment for the Humanities. This virtual program is made possible in part by a major grant from the NEH, and any views, findings, conclusions, or recommendations expressed in these programs do not necessarily represent those of the National Endowment for the Humanities. So welcome to the Frick Art Reference Library's Research Tools series. This is the third of 4 sessions on Zotero, and we're going to be focusing on generating and customizing bibliographies and citations. My name is Ralph Baylor. I am the Interlibrary Loan Lead at the Frick Art Reference Library and the Frick Collection. Assisting me is Eugenie, who will introduce herself now.
Hi everyone, my name is Eugenie Fortier. I am a reference assistant at the Frick Art Reference Library. Welcome.
So let's look at today's schedule. It's very simple. We're looking at just a recap of what we did last week and this introduction. And then we're going to look at bibliographies and citations. And then we're going to wrap up looking ahead, and then finally the Q&A. By the end of today's sessions, you should learn how to create bibliographies and citations within Zotero. And then you're also going to learn how to use Zotero's word processor plugins to generate bibliographies and citation within Microsoft Word and within Chrome. This session is very simple, but it's really the neatest part of Zotero, and it's really the most fun if you are someone who has to write a lot. So as I mentioned, you can generate bibliographies and citations within Zotero or via one of those word processing plugins that are automatically installed when you first install Zotero. We're first going to look at how to generate bibliographies and citations within Zotero itself, and then we're going to cover how to do so within Microsoft Word and within Google Docs. So if you just want to quickly add references to a paper, to an email or a blog post, Zotero's quick copy feature is the easiest way to do it. All you have to do is select items from your reference panel, the middle panel in your Zotero interface, and drag them into any text field. And Zotero will automatically create a formatted bibliography for you. So let me show you what I mean. Let me know if the print in this Zotero library itself is large enough to see. I can change it a little bit, and I'll be happy to. So I'm going to have Zotero open, and I'm going to exit from my presentation. And I'm going to go ahead and open WordPad. WordPad is one of the free word processing softwares that come with a lot of PCs. So you don't need something fancy like Microsoft Word or Google Docs to make citations. You can use WordPad, you can use rich text file, you can use an email, and all you have to do is click on the reference that you want the citation and then drag it over. And you can see it automatically created the citation I wanted, and this is in the bibliographic format. You can also create the way it would look in, let's say, a footnote. All I did to create that citation was to click on the reference I want and drag, with my mouse to the WordPad. If I wanted to see what the footnote format would look like, I'm going to do the same process, only I'm going to hold down the Shift key when I click and drag the item. And you can see that this has been formatted as an in-text citation. The process is really simple. If you needed to change the style for this, that's not a problem at all. You have to do that within Zotero. If you go to Edit, and this is within PC, within a Mac environment, I do believe it's within File. There may even be a Preferences menu altogether, but just look for the Preferences menu button. And then it's the same within Mac or PCs once you open up the Preferences panel. If you go to Export, you can actually choose the default format for this quick copy feature. Right now it's set at APA 7th edition. It's not really one that I would use. I would probably use Chicago manual style, maybe full note, and click OK. And now when I drag that citation over, by default, it's the bibliographic citation in Chicago, 17th edition. And if I wanted to see what a footnote citation looks like, I'm just holding down the Shift key and dragging it over as well. And there it is. And it'll put the citation wherever the cursor is at. So just keep that in mind. And that's another footnote citation. You can do a batch of citations all at once by holding down, selecting the first item, holding down Shift and selecting the list that you want at the last item. Let go Shift at this point, and then click and drag into your document. This will also work within Google Docs or within Microsoft Word. I was just showing you on a word processor that doesn't have a native Zotero connection the way the other two will. And since we're going to go over those two later, I thought this would be good. This will work especially well with, like I mentioned, email as well. Yes, you can drag this to any text-based file. So if there's a field that accepts text, you can click and drag the reference to it, and Zotero will generate that citation. If you happen to have a collection like I do here, and remember if you attended session 2, we talked about creating and organizing collections, you can click and drag entire collections that way as well. I can increase the font one more size. If I increase it any bigger, it tends to get a little unwieldy. So I hope that helps. If you need to make any corrections to a citation in terms of font or format, I will show you how to do that just a little bit. So for the rest of the session, just a little bit of overview of the interface. I'm going to turn some features off of Zotero. We're not going to use Zotero interface very much. So I don't really need, for example, I'm going to go to view layout. I'm going to turn off the collections pane because I'm just going to need to see the references and the info. And the way that I like to view the info pane is not this way. I actually like looking at it at the stacked view. That way I can just have this at the bottom. And you can make those changes looking at the layout. If I wanted to bring back up, for example, the collections pane, I could do so that way. But since we're working primarily within word processing documents to generate those bibliographies and citations, I don't really need this. I'm going to pull everything from my library. I will, though. Make sure I'm in my library first before I turn it off. There we go. One other aspect of the Zotero preferences panel that we're going to get into just right now, not in too much depth, but this is a very user-specific thing. There is site-specific settings that you can see here. So if you're in a certain website, for example, you can quick copy your references within a specific format for that website only. The best example I can give you is if you're a frequent Wikipedia editor. If you, Wikipedia has very specific citation styles that you have to follow. You can set that format to quick drag these references into Wikipedia's editor. So that way it'll format only as Wikipedia references when you're in Wikipedia-based URLs and pages. When you're outside of that, it'll just go to the default format. And remember, you can change the default format within the preferences. under export. The other way to get citations and bibliographies from Zotero is by right-clicking an item and go to Create Bibliography from Item. If I right-click and click that, I will get the citation style again. It defaults here because this is what I've asked it to do, but I can change it. And it's asking me for the output mode, so I can change it to notes or bibliography, and the output method. I can save it as a text format, as HTML. I can directly print it or copy to clipboard. I don't really want to just turn one reference into a bibliography, so I'm going to cancel this, and I'm going to select a few different ones. If I hold Control and hit select, I can select multiple works that aren't directly in order. And now I'm going to right click and then create bibliography from items. And I'll copy it to my clipboard, click OK. And then I'm just going to paste it here. And so that's creating bibliographies and citations just within Zotero. You would probably want to use that, especially if you only need like one or two citations within a paper you've already corrected that you already have. Because if you try to use Zotero for a paper you've done, you would have to reinsert every citation and then make sure that all the references were saved into your Zotero library to begin with. Zotero really works better if you're starting with it from the beginning with a paper. But of course, you can, like I said, format those citations using the Zotero editor that way. So you can just insert what you need, especially if, like, say you've already created that paper and you just needed one citation. So next, we're going to look at word processor plugins. We'll start with Microsoft Word, since that's one that people tend to use a lot, and it's really kind of the best performing plugin. And then we'll look at Google Docs, which is really powerful. Just there are some limitations that we'll cover. Now, the word processor plugin should have already been automatically installed when you installed Zotero. It should detect that you have Microsoft Word and will install the relevant plugin. If for whatever reason it happens that you don't have the Zotero plugin in there, Eugenie is posting the link below to the chat box, and you should be able to access that support pages that show you how to manually install the plugin. So let me open up Word. I have some text here that we've used as in previous example, just without any citations, so that we have something to work with. So notice that we have, the standard layout for Word. And then we have a Zotero panel. I'm just going to check the Q&A to make sure I don't have. Okay. So I assume you can see the Word information correctly. I'm going to make it just a little bit bigger. So we have a couple of buttons that under the Zotero panel. One is add and edit citation. This adds a new citation, or you can use it to edit an existing one wherever the current cursor location is. The add edit bibliography does the same thing, but it's just for the bibliography portion of your text. The document preferences opens up another panel that you can use to make any formatting changes. If you change a reference in your Zotero library that you're using in your paper, then if you hit refresh, that change will be reflected in the references themselves. And I'll show you what I mean in just a second. And finally, there's the Unlink Citations button. This removes field codes in the document that Zotero uses to communicate between your Zotero library and the word processor. Once you remove these, that process is irreversible. You essentially cut the link between Zotero and your document. And so you can't make any of those automatic, really neat citations or bibliographies that Zotero can do. This is something you'll do at the end of your paper. And I'll explain some best practices around it in just a second once we get to that portion of the session. So citing is very easy in Zotero. You're just going to place your cursor where you're going to need your citation. Standard practice, you're probably writing your paper and then adding citations simultaneously. Because I didn't want you to see my horrible typing, I'm just going to have this text as an exercise. So we'll just insert a citation here. The citation itself may not be necessarily relevant to the text. This is primarily just so you can see how the functions work. So I'm going to go ahead and add a citation. And I'm going to get this dynamic menu from Zotero. It's blank, it just has a cursor. And Zotero expects you to know what type of book. You can either search by author or by title or keyword. So I might just type in Italian here. A couple of things to note. It searches for Italian. It found one hit in my library, and it found a couple of other ones in this library called Public Services. That's a group library that I have. So if you have multiple libraries like I do, it'll show you references and it'll space them out by libraries. So we're going to just use this one here. Once you have it in the circle and it's highlighted like this, if you hit enter, it will create the citation as a footnote here. I'm going to go ahead and add a couple more citations that way. Instead of searching for a title, maybe I want to search for author, and I have the citation on Goya's last works. And we'll add one more. I mean, this one is not necessarily relevant to the document, but we'll still add it as part of the exercise. So we have two text, and then we have a journal article with access to its link. Right now, these are just referring to the works as a whole. You don't often want to do that. I mean, when you're writing papers, you're really referring people to specific pages, specific chapters, and Zotero allows you to do that with that dynamic citation. If you need to make an edit to this, for example, if I just highlight or just click on the first citation, the whole thing highlights. That's because right now it's letting you know that Zotero is connected to this document. And so if I go to add edit citation, it'll bring that citation up again. Now, if I click on it, it'll bring me another menu where I can then add page numbers, say 23, or various other formats, book, chapters, columns, figures. I'm going to stick with page. And then I can hit enter, and then hit enter again. And now that citation is changed to reflect the page number that I'm referring to. In the second citation, I may want to add more than one work. Let's look at this text by Ruth McKay. And we'll go ahead and add pages to these two. What's this chapter? I'm going to click on here and we'll add a page. That's a little bit of a lot. There we go. Notice that that's changed. And now we can generate a bibliography. I'm going to just put the bibliography in a new page. Go to Zotero, and then add edit bibliography. Now the bibliography is complete. It's really simple. Oftentimes, when we're creating very thorough bibliographies, we have more works than are actually cited in the document itself. If you click on here and go to Add Edit Bibliography, it'll open up your library, and then you can add more resources that aren't necessarily used as citations within your paper. So I can just add like a Caravaggio. This gives me the references in the bibliography. I can add this one. There it is. And click OK. I might want to add another one. I do want to point out let's see, that you do get this editor here, but notice the warning. If you edit a citation in the editor, it won't update or reflect changes in your Zotero database or within the citation style. You will make any edits this way at the end of your session. So this is where you may want to turn something italic if you prefer it to be in italics, or if you need to make something in bold. But you don't want to do this while Zotero is still connected to your library. If you need to make any changes to a work, you do it in your library and then hit refresh, and then the changes are reflected. So let me look at, for example, Jonathan Brown's work. We'll use the Angus and Brown, actually. Let me go to Add Edit Bibliography. Oh, wrong button. Add Edit Citation. And so if I click on this, I can choose to view it in my library. If I click here, notice that this changed to bring up the reference that I need in Zotero. And I'll do that again just to show you. I'll put this in Caravaggio. Let's go back to the paper. If I click on this, open in my library, it takes me to the reference. Now on the title page, I'm going to do something a little bit scandalous. I'm going to change this. Remember, all these metadata fields are editable. So if I change that, if I hit refresh, that title should change. Let me restart Zotero. There it is. Apologies, I just had to refresh it for a second. But notice the title changed once I hit the refresh button. I can do that again. Let me go to Add Edit Citation. Open in my library. We'll change the title again. I hit enter. Notice that it changed in real time. So obviously you're not going to change titles of books this way just to suit your needs. This is just more of a lark right now. But often if you're importing references from records that have diacritics, characters that aren't part of the alphabet, that could reflect there, and you may need to make those changes. Depending on the reference that you're using, you just want to make any changes to the actual library itself, and not necessarily to your bibliography or your citations here. So let's look at this citation here that has two works. Right now we have two citations or two works within this one citation, but we have no context within them. We don't know why they're together. Zotero actually allows you to add that context, those kind of see, this record cited in this kind of information. So if I click on here and go to add edit citation, notice that I have the two records. I can click on the first one, and now I have this prefix and suffix boxes. This is where you add free text. So you can put C, and then the suffix will come at the end of the reference, and compare with. And notice how this changes in real time. If I click on here, I can add another suffix. And now notice how that citation changes to reflect that context. So while Zotero is connected to your document, while those field codes are in, if you want to make those kind of contextual notes, this is how you'll do it. You don't want to actually come in here and then delete the record because you'll mess with the database itself. And this is the best way to do it. So we looked at the add edit citations, add edit bibliography buttons. Let's take a look at document preferences. So I mentioned in our first session, the overview session, that Zotero allows you a great deal of flexibility. So if you have a journal article or something that you've written in one style, but you need to submit it in another style, you can do that with Zotero by opening up the document preferences and changing it to the style of your choice. So for example, right now we're in Chicago Manual Style 17th edition. We can change that to the MLA 8th edition, hit OK. And now all the notes and citations have changed to reflect that style itself. And the bibliography has changed as well. Let's go ahead and change it back. I hit Document Preferences. We're going to go to the Note edition this time, which is a little bit cleaner, I believe. And then instead of displaying it as footnotes, we may want to display it as endnotes. Click OK. And now we have the document, the bibliography, and we have our endnotes. If you needed to change the actual formatting, let's say these Roman numerals to be numerals, then you would need to do that within Word itself. Word does not, or sorry, Zotero does not affect the formatting. That's all within your document. So that's something you may want to do after you're done with adding your citations and your bibliography. Speaking of which, now we're going to talk about unlinking citations. So you're going to want to unlink citations once you're done with the document or at a point to where you're ready to share it with somebody else who doesn't have access to your library. Once you unlink citations, this action cannot be undone. So you won't be able to add more citations from your Zotero library, and you won't be able to make any of those updates. So be sure that when you do this, you're really done. Best practices is to create two documents. Make a copy of this one, that's your final document that you unlink citations from, and then keep this linked with Zotero. So that way you can come back and make those changes. Maybe a year from now, you have some more information to add to your document, or you need to make that style change from MLA to Chicago or to APA because you're submitting it to a journal where that's their standard style. So it's always a good idea to keep the document, at least one version of it with the Zotero links. Before I unlink citations, I'm just going to change this back to footnotes because I prefer them. And then I'll hit unlink citations. This is such an important step that you'll get a warning from Word and Zotero saying that removing these field codes will prevent Zotero from updating citations and bibliographies in this document. And it's asking if you want to do this. We'll click OK. Now notice that these aren't highlighted. So now if I needed to make any changes, I could in terms of formatting. So if I want to, for example, bold this text or add an additional space between the two because I prefer it that way visually, then that's something I may want to do. If I try to add and edit a citation again, it'll come up, but notice that this now is linked and changed and this one isn't. So this could really lead to some problems if you unlink it before you're ready. Formatting wise, I'll just turn this back. And notice that the bibliography does not reflect the latest item. So when I add edit bibliography, that's now a separate thing. So that's why it's best practice to have those two documents. The one that you're ready to share, that you unlink those citations, and the other one that's a living document, if you will, that you can then add and edit citations as you need. So that's Microsoft Word. Google Docs works almost exactly the same way. Yeah, let's go ahead and show you because it is very similar. I have the same document. Again, no citations. And I have the Zotero pane here. If I hit Zotero, add edit citation, I get the dynamic window again. And there you go. And if any of you know Dr. Brown, please don't let him know I changed the title of his work. So this is a personal preference. I don't like this button because I don't always remember what I'm searching for. I tend to have a lot of references. So you can choose to go to the classic view. If you hit the Z and go to classic view, it opens up the window that looks very similar to your library. You can see that my Zotero library is actually right here, and it's the exact same thing. And now I can add things. So here it is. I can put in the page. Add suffixes. Or prefixes and suffixes. And there it is within the document. There's my bibliography. If I need to make changes, I can just hover over it and hit edit with Zotero. Sometimes it gives me that error. And that's another thing about Google, using with Google Docs. You can run into a lot more errors with the way that Zotero syncs. So if I click on here, yeah. There we are. So now I can make those changes by highlighting it. Having to switch between the dynamic editor and the classic view can be a little bit annoying. It only takes a second, but if you do that, a lot, it's just not as fun. So let me just add the citation and show you within Zotero where you can make that change. So that way it defaults to the classic view if that's something that you prefer. If you go to Edit and Preferences and go to Cite, and go to Word Processors, click it on Use the Classic Add Citation dialog. Will make that default for you. And this is also where you would install the Microsoft Word add-in if it's not currently installed, by the way. It does have support for LibreOffice if you use that as it's an open source software. It's a word processor as well. We're not going to cover that in these sessions, but that is an option as well. So there are some limitations to using Google Docs with Zotero for bibliographies and citations. You should know that anyone making changes to the document needs to have the Zotero connector installed. So citations that are cut and pasted without the connector installed will be unlinked, so that can cause some issues. And if someone views the document itself without having the Zotero connector installed and you haven't unlinked the citations will show up as URLs rather than the actual formatted citations. In addition to that, citation inserts and their edits slow down quite significantly as the number of citations increases. So once you get over 100 citations within Google Docs, a single citation could take upwards of 10, 12 seconds. So if you have longer documents or more citations, you may want to use Word rather than Google Docs. And also there's some limited text formatting within Google Docs. So be careful with using that as well. But other than those limitations, if you're using this for a paper and you can keep it under 100 or so citations, this is really a useful tool. And folks, that is bibliographies and citations in a nutshell. It's a very simple feature of Zotero, but also one that deserves its own session. So I hope you got some information out of this and feel more comfortable generating those citations and features. Looking ahead, we only have one more session left. It'll probably be on the shorter side, similar to this one, because we're looking at a very specific set of features, syncing and collaboration. So we'll talk about how to create group libraries, how to set permissions for those libraries so you can begin that collaboration. And we'll look at some syncing preferences for the group libraries itself. And finally, we'll look at how to restore local or group libraries by actually restoring my library back to its default so that way I can begin using my work computer for Zotero. I have these resource links right here. I'm going to leave this page up for about 20 seconds or so, since we will get those slide decks to you later than I anticipated, if you need to write that. And of course, you can write to me directly at library@frick.org, and I'll respond. It usually takes me a day or two to respond. I'm only on site a couple of days a week, and when I work from home, I tend to work with some other type of activities and tasks. But I will get back to you. I hope you enjoyed this session. Just a reminder that this virtual program has been made possible in part by a major grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities. And any views, findings, conclusions, or recommendations expressed in these programs do not necessarily represent those for the National Endowment for the Humanities.